Today I'm going to talk about match transformation in Maya and try to demonstrate how to do it through the Python script so that I can further explain how those coding are set up in Maya and also how you can use it in other DCC software such as Blender. So how the match transformation works, let me close this first. When you go to modify match transformation, you can tear off the match transformation menu. So once you tear off, like as you can see, there's like a two object in the viewport. So if you select the spheres and then select the cube, and you hit match all the transformation, the spheres will go to the position of the cube. So how does it work? Basically, when you think about like how does it work, it's like the spheres try to copy the translation and to become his translations. So it is like about the getting the data from the transformation of the cube and then set it up as the new transformation of spheres. So let me demonstrate how to do it in Python script. So first of all, you need to import my CMDS as CMDS. And then we have to think about how it demonstrates how it works. So first of all, let me deselect first. When we are doing it, we are selecting two objects, and then we when we hit the match or transformation button, it will just execute the script. So basically, we need a list for selecting for the selection for the geometry selection. We need a list to put these two objects together so that we can grab the to grab their data, their transformation data, or to set the data. Second, we need to define which object is the first, which object is the last one. It's like defining which object is the child, while which object is the parents. So we need to define which one is the target object, which objects is a reference object. And then once we define which object the parents and child, we get the data from the parents object. So basically the parents object is the last item of the object, the last selection. And set the data get got from the parents object to become transform data of the children object. So once we know what we need to do, so we can type the script now. So in order to select, we put these two objects into the selection list. We need to have a list for sure. So selection list, or I can make a better name, mesh list equals to cmdsls selection equals to true. The type is the transform, because basically we are not selecting, why we are choosing the transform, because we are not selecting the geometry, we are not selecting the shape. So we basically need to select the transform of the object from the geometry, so that we can do the mesh transformation within the objects. So if you click Maya here, there's like for each object, there's like a constraint in between the shape and also the group. So basically, if we select the mesh list shape, if you just type the mesh list shape and CMLS selection choose, it will give the geometry shape rather than giving the transform. So it's better for us if we want to like select the transform, we need to tell the system that we want to select the transform. So that's why I need to type transform. Sorry. It should be this like transform. See. Computer. Oh, instead of doing the capital letter, I need to do it in the small letter, lowercase. So once we were selecting the geometry, it will be, there will be showing the equipment attributes. I can show it here. Showing the transform. This. So let's comment the shape list first. So we have finished the first step. We get the mesh list. We create a mesh list from what we have selected now in the viewport. What I mean is the geometry. Like we were selecting the geometry. And then once we execute this code, it was selecting like the spheres transform and the cube transform. So after that, we need to try to get the attributes, the transform attributes from the last item. So how can we find the last items? In order to find the last items, but actually very obvious now from this stage, the last item is the second item of the list. So the last item is the second item of the list. So basically, when we type in like list 2, the last item, last item equals to mesh these, and then number 1, not number 2, because in terms of my Python index, it will count 0 as the first selection, the first item, and the number 1 is the second item. The index. So once we execute, it will show like the cube 1 is the last item. But in order to do it, like if want to do something like the multiple objects, you need to I mean, like to make the script to be more innovative, you need to tell the systems which one is the last item. Like if you got the like multiple objects, it will be hard to just hard coding which item is the last item. So there's like a different ways to do this. First of all, we can do something like number of the mesh item. We can use the code called line length 2, so that it could list out how many items of the list. Sorry, this should be mesh list. So once we execute the code and then we print this one out, the result is number 2. But thinking about like the index in terms of Python, how Python read is starting from 0 instead of 1, so we have to -1 so that we can get the correct answer of the last items. Otherwise, they will just count it as an error for out of index out of range, because they usually read the index starting from 0 rather than starting from 1. So let me elaborate a bit. Mesh index. So once we execute, like write another code, so it will display the same answer as the. Oh, let me do it like this way. So once we execute this one and this one, the answer will be the same. So let me comment this out first. So next step, we need to get the attribute transform from the last items, the parents object. Get the transform attributes from the last item. In order to do that, we can use the command cmds get attributes. So depends on which attributes you would like to get. So for this case, we need to get the attribute x. So let me. So the answer would be the last item. Let me stop it here first. Forgot.救命啊！唔記得咗成日都。Type script記得。It will be the CMDS get attributes plus items plus dot plus or you can do something like translate x. We will elaborate like further a bit later. So let me set the this would be the translate x parents. So once we execute the code, the result is 0. When you check the cube, it's 0. It's 0. Let me print this out so that you can have better understanding. So basically we do print print transform translate x is last item and translate x parent. So basically what it does is like I try to print the last item, which is the 0. The cube object translate x is the one that we get from the attribute we got from this coding. So once I execute the code, the system shows that the cube when translate x is 0. So it is 0 here. So we get the translate x from the cube. So let's do it to try to set the attributes for the first objects, which is the child object. Transform attributes for the child object. So basically we need to do something like getting the first objects from the mesh list. So and then set it to be to the new transform attributes from the previous like selection, which is the last item we did for getting the attribute data. And let me set it as a child cmds set editor so that we can set the first items objects. We can set the transform attributes for the child objects, the first item object. We need to tell the system which one we gonna to set the new attributes from the new data. So it will be mesh list 0 plus translate x, and then we need to put the data we get from the last items to set to become the data of the first objects, the spheres. So when we execute the code, the spheres will go into the cube. I can do it again. Let me just make it smaller. So when we execute the code, the spheres will take the data from the cube, the translate X data from the cube to set to become his new translate X data. So this is basically how the mesh transformation works in Maya. Mấy個先去邊咧？應該有兩個，係啊。整多。The code that I am demonstrating is a fairly hard coding, so it doesn't mean like the way it doesn't mean it's entirely the way that mesh transformation works. So if you want to learn more about the mesh transformation, you need to dive more into the deep to do the coding. So you can see like the translation, rotation, and scalings, and match all the transforms. For this case, I don't talk about the prefix first because it's a bit like more advanced level. So to elaborate from this one, the coding that I was just demonstrating to the more innovative one, it needs some kind of elaboration and words. So let me explain further a bit. So for this case, I have set up two functions in order to do all the way to match all transforms. So basically I set up similar things like create a list for the selection objects, like all the selections. And then I try to get the numbers of the objects from the selection list. And I try to set up like if the 이거 혹시 마음 if the object number is less than 2. So basically, if you do the whole mesh transformation process, you need to select more than one object. So if you don't select more than one object, you cannot execute the code because you need the objects to get the data from, and also you need the object to set the data from the objects that got the data from. I know it's a bit complex, but you can see from the last case like how it works. Like we need to at least 2 objects to do so. So if like the object is less than 2, we just give the warning to the users that we need to select like at least 2 objects. So we need to tell the users like, oh, you need to select at least 2 objects so that you can execute the code. So once we do the if else conditionals, we can start to write the script to get the data from the last item of the selection list, as I mentioned, like in the previous, like way more simpler Python script. So we need to get the data like, actually this one is not a good example to set up the code, but we need to get the data from the XYZ. So basically this code is getting the attributes from the last items, which I previously tell you that we can use the number of the objects and -1, so that to get the last item of the selection list, because Python is like starting from index 0 rather than starting from 1. So basically we can tell the system like which transform time we need to get. So we need to get like, let's say the scale or the translate or rotations. And I also put it here so that I can set up like I can do the input like here to match up here, and then add the XYZ here. So in order to set up like set the transform attributes, we will do something like in a different way, because we don't want to hard coding or like assuming any numbers of the selection list or the object list that need to be set the new transform attributes. So we can do it through like counting how many numbers of the selection list. So basically we need to like eliminate, not include the last item of the list. So basically we had to do something like less number, like let's do some assumption, like let's say if the number of the objects will be less than 1 value, it won't count the last items. So by this case, we can do it through like not like by do it for like in in the assuming the I less than the object numbers. So CMDS set selection list I, which this which is looping the object numbers in the list, like which is loop through the object numbers, number of the objects like we have set up here. Sorry, I need to sorry, I have some froms in my throat, so it kind of like make my conversation a bit broken, and I just like thinking about like, oh, that's like a from in my throat, so I cannot talk really well. So basically, let me clarify a bit. It's like for this case, I need to do a for loop or looping through the numbers by depending on the object numbers. So, but we don't want to select the last items. So we need to assume like the I will be less than the number of the objects so that we won't select the last item. So once we do this as assumption or conditions, we can set the attributes like different items of the attributes from the last items from the transform data from the last item of the attributes. So once we execute all the codes, so let me clean up this one a bit because I put it here. So once we execute all the code, it will just parents to the last items that in this selection list, which is this one. So let me execute again. So here we are. Here is how the last transformation works. Sorry guys, I'm not really good at organization skills, so that's why I present this. The whole set of theories that may sound confusing, or it may sound really abstract, but if you get any questions, you can go ahead and feel free to shoot me a message or email, or you can comment it up below. If you got any questions about the Python scripting, like it's not really complicated one, you can just like DM me if you can. Yeah, if you are interested. Yeah. So thank you so much for hearing me talking really long. I hope next time my public speaking skills can increase a bit more. So see you then.